I wasn't looking for putting together a patchwork of vendors to put together an offering that I was going to go sell. I wanted a true partnership. And I think you really nailed it when you said, a partnership, the difference between a vendor and a partnership is a vendor is just taking your money and providing a service, and it's a loose exchange of value. In a partnership, there's really goal alignment, right? And I think that's the big difference. And
I'm Chris Engler with Engler IT. You're listening to the Cyber Brisket Podcast. I specialize in IT and cybersecurity with over 25 years of experience and a team at the forefront of innovation. Our guests let us know what's hot in IT and how to keep your business from getting cooked. With me here today is Chris Traxler, Senior Vice President of End Client Sales at the 20 MSP. A channel veteran with nearly 20 years of sales and executive leadership experience. Chris has successfully scaled multiple managed service providers beyond 1 million in revenue. He previously founded and served as CEO of Cirrus Technologies, an Ohio-based MSP that was acquired by the 20 in 2022. Known for blending deep sales expertise with an engineering background, Chris Traxler excels at building scalable sales systems and high-performing teams. Chris, welcome to the Cyber Brisket Podcast.
yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I've been really excited for this conversation because there's so many things that I want to ask you. And so I have some questions here for you. And here's the first one. Having grown MSPs from the ground up and then operating at an executive level, what do founders most commonly underestimate when transitioning from building a business to truly scaling it?
That's a great question. I think, when you're starting out, especially like me, when I started at zero, you're the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. You're doing everything, and you have to do everything out of necessity. But you cannot grow a successful, profitable business if everything relies on you. So very early on, I think the smartest things I learned was building systems very early on and hiring and delegating and elevating very quickly, right? Even from day one, before I had any revenue coming in, I had I had a part-time marketing person I was paying for. And I was leveraging the 20 myself as well. And so that allowed me to free up my focus and really focus on building the business instead of just being stuck in the weeds. I think the mistake a lot of MSP owners make is they come into it and they're very technically minded, and that's where their comfort zone is. That's where they're really good. And so they spend the predominant amount of time in the business doing technical work. And the problem with that is that comes at the expense of growing the business. So the sooner that you can hire and hire good quality talent, that allows you to offload that technical work where you can continue to be wearing the sales and marketing hat as long as you can. And I think, if you look at when you get to the point of scale, you made it when the business runs day to day, whether or not you show up. I knew my business was finally at scale when I could go on a 10-day vacation, be completely unplugged, not connected to the internet, and really not a good practical way for anybody to reach me. And I didn't have to worry about whether the business was going to be functioning or not.
Yeah, that reminds me of a lot of advice that I've gotten in my career. And one of them I'm thinking about right now is E-Myth, where it's like, hey, you're doing everything, but you're not necessarily running the machine. And yeah, I agree with you because I see it all the time, especially when I look at my peers. I just see people that are very, very good at being in IT, but not necessarily business minded.
Yeah.
Great. All right, I got another question for you. How has your engineering mindset changed the way you design sales processes? And what lessons can non-technical sales leaders apply from systems thinking?
I think the first misconception people have about sales is that the best salespeople are just natural Rico Suave, and they know they just can say the right things, and they're very persuasive. And don't get me wrong, I mean, that's good to have, but sales is actually very scientific and it's very process driven. And if you have clarity around what your sales process should be, and you have discipline and follow that process, and you systematize the sales process, that's where you're going to get much better results and be more consistent. And that becomes especially true when you start hiring salespeople and it's not just you. When it's just you, you can kind of get by without having a really clearly defined sales process. But when you're hiring and training salespeople to go out and sell on your behalf or sell for you, if you don't have a sales process, it almost never works. And
Sure.
so, just like, the analogy I would make is just like, if you're going to go out and do a server deployment, good MSPs don't just show up and wing it, right? They build a project plan. They've got a whole sequence of steps that they're going to follow to deploy that server, and they know they're going to get much better results and a much better outcome if they do that. It's the same thing in sales.
Yeah, you usually spend twice as much time, if not more, planning than you do executing.
Yeah, yeah. Most deals are lost not because of price or because of a bad service or product. Most sales are lost because they didn't follow a good sales process.
Sure, I'm definitely in agreement there. All right, I got another question for you. You founded Cirrus Technologies and later saw it acquired by the 20 MSP. How did your perspective on growth, culture, and succession change across that journey?
For me, when I started Cirrus Technologies, I was starting that business right from the get-go with the idea that I was building to sell at some point. I knew I wanted to build. That's what got me really interested in the MSP space to begin with, was the magical monthly recurring revenue, right? That's something magical that a lot of businesses don't have. And so I knew I was building to sell. So that kind of grounded me to do the right things right from the start, so that I was building something that was going to build value right from day one. I was not just focused on, don't get me wrong, when you start at zero, you're focused on getting a paycheck. But
Sure.
after you get your basic needs met, then I was hyper focused on how do I build equity? How do I build value? And a valuable MSP is one that doesn't depend on the owner showing up every day. And so that was I would say, my primary focus. I think, if you look at the evolution from, okay, prior to selling, and how my role has changed and my perspective has changed. The interesting thing, when you go from, when you're running the business, it's very easy to, if you don't have a good accountability structure, and you're not in peer groups, it's very easy to give yourself a pass. And that's why a lot of small business owners and MSP owners don't really grow, is they have no accountability and they're just showing up and reacting to the day. And the difference is, when you're in an organization our size, growth and scalability is not optional, right? You have to be growing. You have to be adding new recurring revenue every single month, because if you're not growing, you're dying. And that really becomes true at scale. The stakes are a lot higher when you have 400 plus employees that you got to meet payroll on, versus you're a small business and you got 5 employees, right? And so I think
Yeah,
that's the big difference. And the biggest lesson I would say, knowing what I know now, is even though I was pretty focused on growth, the hindsight is always 2020. I wish I would have been even more focused.
don't we all? Yeah. And so that reminds me of something that we bring up a lot when we're talking to our prospects, and that's a term that we or an idea that we call tribal knowledge versus institutional knowledge, or something along those lines. Because I think when we're talking about scaling, we're also talking about eliminating single points of failure, and in taking on the certain level of operational maturity, I think, at the same time, in order to facilitate all of that.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good. Okay, so as MSPs mature, what does great end client sales leadership look like today? And how is it different from what worked even 5 years ago?
I think a few things. One, the mistake a lot of MSPs make when they hire a salesperson is their training and onboarding of that salesperson is basically a pat on the back and good luck and here you go and here's a login to the CRM, and there is nothing beyond that. They're hiring someone with hopes and prayers that that person is just going to magically produce. And even experience, even if you're hiring someone experienced in sales or a veteran in sales, it's no different than professional sports, right? The best professional sports teams also have the best professional coaches. And so if you're going to be hiring salespeople, someone needs to be the coach of the organization. I think that's a big one. And what makes a good coach? Well, obviously natural leadership ability and tendencies make a big difference, but a coach also has a very clearly defined playbook that he trains and teaches the entire team and makes sure that they're following, and that's going to include constant constant retraining, constant focus, after action reviews, dissecting deals. It's not like I hire a salesperson, I send them to some training, or I train them one time on our model and our pricing and packaging, and I tell them to have at it. It's ongoing. It's constant. Just like coaching in professional sports is ongoing and constant. You're doing tape review. You're preparing for each game. It's the same thing, and so all those things matter. And then you have to have a sales methodology. It cannot just be loose, basics of, okay, here's our pricing, here's our proposal, go out and here's our value proposition. A good sales organization is going to have a sales methodology that they focus on. And so there's different sales methodologies. There's Medic, there's Sandler, there's Challenger. We at the 20, we follow, pretty much the Challenger sales model is most relevant to what we sell. But having a good sales methodology is really important along with your playbook.
Very good. Makes a lot of sense. I got one last question here before we move on to our next section.
Yeah.
And so when building sales teams that can scale, what traits matter most? Skills, mindset, or structure? And how do you intentionally develop those qualities?
Yeah, good question. I think they all matter. Some of that, though, is going to depend on the organization that's hiring the person. Some of that is going to be dependent on the salesperson, right? When I'm looking at good salespeople, probably one of the biggest things I'm looking for is what is their track record of success selling monthly recurring revenue in a services-based organization. Because you can talk to a lot of people in sales that were product sales. Some might have been very good as farmers, some might have been very good selling product, and selling services is very different. Selling what we sell is very different. So I want to look for someone that has a proven track record of success doing largely what we do. And maybe that's not direct managed services. It could be something ancillary, where they're selling services on monthly recurring revenue. But I want to see that. And for me, track record of success is how consistently were they hitting quota? I would say with 90% certainty, if I hire someone that cannot demonstrate consistent quota attainment, selling services with monthly recurring revenue, 90% of the time that person will not work out and you're wasting your time hiring them. So that's probably the first and foremost thing that I'm looking for. It's the easiest way to vet out and screen potential candidates. I would also say mindset is really important. I need to hire someone that comes batteries included, right? I'm not here to be your therapist or your counselor. You have to come ready to, fully charged and ready to play, and you have to have a winning mindset. So second to that is I'm looking for someone that, has strong belief and desire to succeed. They're hungry. Um, they're ready to hit the ground running, and they're not someone that I have to spend a lot of time babysitting.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
The
I
the
don't like babysitting.
Yeah, the teaching the sales process and our pricing and packaging and how we sell, that's probably tertiary, in importance. It's important, like they have to have a basic understanding, but I'm looking for those first two things first, because if they can do those, they can sell what we sell.
Makes a lot of sense. That's great. So one thing, so I'd like to change gears here real quick. We've been talking a lot about you and your experience, and it is extensive, and it's always impressive having a conversation with you. And I'm grateful to have learned a little bit more about you so far. But what I would like to talk about now is a little more about the 20, because Engler IT has a special relationship with the 20. We're part of this group, this nationwide group of several hundred MSPs throughout the nation, and it really empowers us to do a lot of things. But most specifically, there's an aspect or there's a nature to the relationship that's special, and it's the same kind of thing that Engler IT tries to bring to their clients, and that's what I call being a true partner. And I'll just kind of hash this out for the audience so that they can kind of understand what we're talking about here. And if you've ever hired anybody to do anything for you, whether it's work on your house or or perform a service or anything like that, then you're have been through a situation where you've paid somebody to do something and you haven't necessarily achieved maybe the outcome that you were looking for. And that's because when you go out to the marketplace, there's plenty of people that are willing to take your money and they'll do X, Y, Z for that money, but not necessarily keep track of what the outcome is the desired outcome. And so at Engler IT, we are 100% outcome focused, and so we deliver and drive those outcomes for our clients day in and day out. And that's one thing that the 20 does for Engler IT too. And you guys really help us do that. And I feel like it's important because when you're kind of like running a business, you've got a bunch of things happening all over the place, and you've got a bunch of fronts where you're fighting battles all the time, or at least that's the way it seems. And maybe battles isn't quite the right word to use, but you definitely have a front that's on the service delivery side where you're kind of dealing with the chaos of the world, and that's kind of what you're hired to do, is to straighten things out over there. But then oftentimes what I find is that you partner with people to help provide you with services, and they don't necessarily always focus on the outcome. They're just kind of like, hey, well, I did XYZ for you, and therefore I'm entitled to this money, regardless of the outcome that has been produced. And so I always try to, and I found it essential to search for those partnerships where the person that I'm paying is focused on the outcome, because then they're really advocating for me. And so I'm wondering if maybe, and I realize maybe I've been a bit long-winded here, but I am interested to learn a little bit about your perspective in regards to having a true partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I also lived it because I started an MSP. I was unique in that I started an MSP from zero, and I was leveraging the 20 from day one, right? When the concept of the 20 was really coming to fruition. And for me, I think you hit the nail on the head. I wasn't looking for putting together a patchwork of vendors to put together an offering that I was going to go sell. I wanted a true partnership. And I think you really nailed it when you said, a partnership, the difference between a vendor and a partnership is a vendor's just taking your money and providing a service, and it's a loose exchange of value. In a partnership, there's really goal alignment, right? And I think that's the big difference. And so that's what really resonated me, and it made me sold on the idea of the 20 from day one, because growing an MSP and providing managed services and doing it right is incredibly challenging. It's incredibly difficult. And so the idea of being able to join, not just find a vendor, but the idea behind joining an MSP community of peers where we were sharing and collaborating literally hundreds of years of combined knowledge, best practices, standardization, and really under the premise of we're better together, plus building out the shared resources, right? The support desk and knock. We could together build something that was far better than what any individual MSP could do on their own. And that really resonated with me. And I think the fact that, since the inception of the 20, when you join as a member, you have agency and you have advocacy, right? You're part of the process in terms of how things develop and how ththings improve over time from a service delivery and functionality and capability. And I always felt like I had agency, a big piece of agency in that, every step of the way as we were building the 20. I think the other thing too is it's very difficult. If you look at the average MSP, they have less than 10 employees. And so you're limited by the skills and knowledge and expertise of a small team of people. And when you leverage the 20, all of those limitations go by the wayside. And that was really cool for me because like, from day one, I mean, I was able to go out and sell much larger deals than I would have been able to land on my own if I was a one-man band or a three-person MSP. I just wouldn't have been able to close them. And because I didn't have the technical expertise, I didn't have the talent, the bench, the depth, and all that. And so I could go out and sell some pretty complex clients and solutions, with SAN storage, VMware clusters, pretty advanced networking, stuff that I had never touched before. And, had I not been a part of the 20, it would have been really difficult to say yes to. So I think that's the third piece is just the community. And that allowed me to really scale not only with larger clients, but also geographically because we had the member footprint. And that was probably the other big piece was having the member community and boots on the ground coverage. When I sold in 2022, we were supporting clients all the way from Denver, Colorado, through up and down the East Coast and everywhere in between. So I think it was almost 19 states. And trying to do that on your own or leveraging contractors or Field Nation, really difficult to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are times when we do go that route, but it's for typically specialty situations where we know that there's a high level or high likelihood of success.
Yeah.
Uh, being part of the 20s definitely a big deal, and it has never felt like a vendor relationship to me. It's always felt like a partnership.
Yeah.
Because I've like what you were saying early on, I've got skin in the game, or to a degree. Oh no, I definitely have skin in the game because I got my name on the wall, and that means something to me. I'm going around and working with you guys, and we're sharing work, and I'm slapping my name on everything, and maybe my name doesn't mean anything to other people, but definitely means something to me. And so you guys have always done right by me and always surpassed my expectations. And one thing that I really appreciate is the camaraderie that exists across the membership. And even throughout, not just the membership, but throughout the organization, because I realize the organization is evolving as well and growing. And so I've always been somewhat of a stakeholder there because I'm not really like necessarily treated as a customer or a client. I'm kind of treated as a partner as well because I have influence, like you were saying. I've got some type of agency and influence over how policy and operating procedures and things of that nature. And I've seen others contribute as well. And it's just amazing and actually to me because I don't always see organizations embracing the knowledge and the talents of their membership. It's oftentimes like a very top down thing, and I'm not necessarily seeing that here. I'm seeing this more like this is definitely a community driven situation.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting. I would, I would always lead with the 20, when I was out selling our services because it was a huge differentiator. If I could tell the story of how I was part of a national group of IT service providers and I wasn't just my own MSP living on its own island, that resonated so much for two reasons. One, I think because, a lot of small businesses have been burned by an MSP that, you know, underpriced their services,
Mhm.
over promised and under delivered, was limited, didn't really have a good bench of depth and knowledge and expertise. So they're always learning on the customer's dime. And when you could tell that story that you're part of a national group of IT service providers, you're sharing and collaborating. I can't tell you how many times when I would tell that story, the prospect that we were talking to they would say, "Man, that is awesome. We've always tried to do that in our industry, and nobody has been able to do it. So it's awesome that you guys cracked that code."
Definitely a unique and fun situation to be in. Um, I would like to talk about one of the things that makes, well, I guess we've been talking about all kinds of things that makes the 20 special, but there is another thing in particular that makes the 20 unique, and that's ID 2020. And I've read through so many breaches over the years that have cost huge organizations hundreds of millions of dollars in breaches and legal fees and lost revenue and you name it. And it seems like if they had just had something like this in place, that the whole situation would have been avoided. And so one thing I know, and hopefully you can elaborate here, is I know that this is something that the 20 developed in-house, and I know that it's uh, or has been more or less exclusive to us over over the last several years has been in development. But I'm wondering if you could speak on that a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you rewind a few years ago, when the 20 really started gaining traction and we were really at scale, both as an MSP and as an organization of MSPs, that the question came up was like, okay, we're fielding thousands of phone calls every day from end clients and end users. How can we verify that person is who they say they are when they're calling in? Very important question, right? And if you go back and look at history, there have been several major breaches that have cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And the latest one with Clorox, even now, is that the MSP is actually being sued because all those breaches originated with the help desk. It was a threat actor who socially engineered them, called in the help desk, impersonated someone in the organization, did a password reset, and boom, now they have administrative credentials into an environment that they should not be accessing, and it's game over at that point. And so we at the 20, we looked around and we looked for tools in the marketplace that would be a viable option, and very quickly determined there really wasn't a good tool that existed. There were some tools that existed, but they had severe limitations, and one of them being, okay, you have to have an app installed on a phone. What's the problem with that? Fundamentally, the problem is the number one time someone's going to issue a password reset is when they got and they bought a new phone and now they've got no apps and
Sure.
services, and they're trying to log in and they don't know their password. Well, if that requires an app on the phone, guess what ends up happening in every case? They just disable the functionality, so they bypass it and they give this person credentials. Well, that's also the most likely situation for a breach, right? And so we developed ID 2020. We actually wrote the software, and it's a double blind end user verification system. And so double blind meaning that the support desk technician doesn't know the code, can't read the code. The person on the other end has to read the code. It's sent out via text message or email, and so they get that code, they read it to the technician. The code matches, whoever's on the support desk line can provide support. If not, they're not authorized to provide support.
Yeah, we're
So
not worried about people recognizing voices or anything like that, because even now with AI, You can impersonate someone's voice pretty easy.
100%. And that's always what we hear, when we're talking to MSPs that don't have it or they're not, because that's a question we'll ask, like, how are you verifying the end user is who they say they are? It's like, sometimes we'll hear, well, we're a boutique MSP, we know our clients and we can recognize their voices. That's a dangerous game to play, and it doesn't scale. Um, and so the answer to that question becomes really important. And I think it's also, for any member of the 20, it also becomes a huge wedge question when you're talking to prospects, right? Because their existing MSP probably doesn't have a good answer for that. And it's, you should rightly be concerned.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about, or if you're talking to a prospect that might have 50 or 100 or several hundred users, you're gonna have a hard time getting to know each and every one of those people.
Yeah. And literally, if I'm a threat actor, I can spend 15 minutes on the internet scouring for information and probably find enough to socially engineer a company, especially when they're above 50 million in revenue. There's a lot of data points I can go out and find that are publicly available. As far as who the key people are, I can find a lot of back-end data on what services they're using or other, I can scour their RSS feeds, their company blog, and I can use all that information to social engineer them and gain access to the environment.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think one of the most simple ones, and this doesn't necessarily speak to the support desk, so I'll go a little off topic, but I'll put this here for the benefit of the audience, and that is when folks have the contact information for their leadership published on their website. And I'm always seeing inevitably when you do that, there will be countless emails or in text messages from the CEO to the CFO with all kinds of wiring instructions and
Yep.
ACH transfer instructions that need to be updated and such.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, but yes, the ID 2020 shoring up that social engineering vector for the support desk is huge because the support desk, they've got the keys to the castle,
Yeah,
and we want to make sure without a doubt that they are talking to who they should be talking to. And this is actually reminding me of something else that the 20 does, and that is we make sure that we have documented who's allowed to tell the support desks or to instruct the support desk to do different tasks. And
yeah,
I'm not really sure how other people deal with this. I have never really seen it or anywhere or how they talk about it, but not everybody in the company should be able to call up the support desk and initiate a password reset for another user or restore files from a backup or add or God forbid add a user
yeah.
to the system. Not everybody, not everybody in the office should be able to do that. It's only a few key people. And I think that starts to get into the operational maturity aspect of the 20 that we tend to reference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's two things. One, having an approval matrix, in terms of what level of authority that user has is really important. And a lot of MSPs don't have anything, but even more fundamentally important, most MSPs don't even maintain an accurate database of users authorized to call in for support, period, for the organization. And the problem with that is now you don't even know if that person even still work for the company, right?
Yeah,
And
or is
guess
there
whose
some new?
fault it's going to be if you as the MSP give them something that they shouldn't have or were not entitled to have. It's whether or not that MSP, whether or not that client even told you they were fired, that's going to be your fault. So
Yeah.
I think that that's the one kind of side benefit of ID 2020 is because we use that, it also forces adoption of maintaining an accurate list and a current list of users who are entitled to call support, and then the approval level on top of that.
I can't tell you the number of times that a client of mine has hired a new team member and had that team member call into the support desk and we have no idea who they are. And
Yeah.
then and then maybe for a minute they might get a little upset that we didn't help them. But then we start to lay out the situation like, oh yeah, that's probably good that you did not help them, some stranger that you've never heard of before, gain access to our
Yeah,
system.
it's a minor inconvenience, but it's good. It's a good price to pay. It's a good trade-off. And I would also add on the other end, every single month, there's not a month that goes by where we don't have someone that was terminated by a client of ours who made some sort of attempt to call in and regain access because they wanted to pull a client list or exfiltrate data out of the company, and because they were properly terminated, and we maintain that database of authorized users. If they call in, if they were fired on Friday and they call in on Monday, they're not going to be able to get support from us. They're not going to get a password reset or gain access. So it really shores things up. Also, not a month goes by where we don't have legitimate threat actors or impersonators calling in trying to get support, and we've cut off a potential attack. Every single month it happens. So I would say, if you don't have some sort of end user verification as an MSP, it's not a matter of if, but when somewhere a breach happens with one of your clients, it's going to happen.
Great. There's one last thing that I want to touch on here, and that is I guess the nature of the support desk. And the support desk, I have seen it evolve over time and it has really become something quite special. And I have never once felt like I was outsourcing anything to anybody. And there's some people that could shine a negative light on us for working with the 20 in leveraging the support desk and say, oh, they're just outsourcing their support desk. And I tell you what, um, I've spoken to colleagues of mine that have gone down that route where they truly are outsourcing it, and they're working with some type of support desk that's offering these services, and it's not necessarily like a relationship like the 20 where they're also involved in the organization, have agency in its development, have leadership roles inside the organization, and so there's something really special about the support desk and the dedicated team that we have that's working with our clients. And we're always getting rave reviews about our clients' interactions with them. And it actually speaks to, and I realize I may be digressing here, but my mind's going and I kind of want to entertain this because there's one thing I always like to talk about whenever I'm running into any kind of prospect that doesn't know anything about us, and that is extreme accountability. And the 20 does this, and because the 20 does this, Engler IT can do it too. And essentially the idea is behind that term is that we're always we have all these systems in place that are tracking our performance, that are kind of like watching the tickets open, watching them close, how long it's taking, how many touches it is, whether or not it's being escalated, all that stuff. Oh, the phone calls that are coming in, we're tracking all these things and we're always soliciting feedback all the time. And it allows us to have these metrics that we can share. And I'm not really sure that anybody that has a quote unquote outsource support desk can really have the kind of numbers that we're showing.
Yeah, you always hear, if you go to any MSP channel event, the common thing that you hear is, your help desk is the bread and butter of your organization. You just cannot or it's outsource it. And I would say, what, largely they're probably right. And why is that? Well, if you look at an outsourced, there's plenty of outsourced help desks that are just, a vendor product solution. The problem with them fundamentally is if you're going to be an outsourced help desk, you're catering to hundreds of MSPs, all operating individually with their own company way of doing business, with their own scope of work, with their own predominant business model, with their own tool stack. And that help desk has to cater to the lowest common denominator. And
Yeah, they don't
so
stand a chance.
they don't stand a chance. The difference fundamentally with the 20 is A, we don't just sell a help desk to anybody off the street. The help desk is a shared service that you gain access to by being a member. And two, we're hundreds of MSPs who are all singing to the same sheet of music, following the same business process, the same model, the same way of documenting things. And because of that, we can attain a much higher quality result and product through that, right? Because we're not having to cater to everybody individually. Um, but the other thing, if you look at, the basic fundamentals, at the end of the day, your clients and users really, they care to a certain extent, who they're talking to, but what they care most about is when they call, are they able to get quick and competent help? That's really what matters. And if you look at our numbers and our stats, very few MSPs can tout true 24/7 live answer coverage with sub 90-second hold time where they're actually talking to a live technician. They're not talking to a dispatcher or an answering service or someone that's going to collect information for someone to call them back hours later. They're talking to a live technician that can actually help them out. And if you look at our numbers and our resolution response rates and everything else that we track, you'd be hard pressed to find any MSP at scale that can hit our numbers, period.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I haven't really seen anything like it, and I'm really proud to be a member here. And I'm also super delighted that you've spent all this time with us today and shared some of your wisdom.
Yeah.
I don't really have any other questions. I think unless there's anything you wanted to add, it's probably a good time to say adieu.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you having me on, and we definitely appreciate the partnership.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah. Thanks.
See ya. Bye.
Yep. See ya.
You're listening to the Cyber Brisket Podcast. What's hot in IT and how to keep your business from getting cooked.